What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Cash Miller of TitanDigital.com. You could also check his website out, franchise.TitanDigital.com, which we will talk about. But Cash, I always like to mention other podcasts people should check out, episodes people should check out on the podcast. And since this is part of the Top Agency series, I did 2 episodes with Jason Swank, which was really interesting. He talked about how he built up and sold his 8-figure agency. Another one is now he's been buying agencies and how he evaluates them and how they find them and how they communicate with them and build them up. So check that out. Also, Todd Taskey, another interesting one, has a Second Bite podcast. And he also talks about, he kind of matches agencies with private equity. And he helps sell agencies essentially. And he finds sometimes they make more on the second bite than they do on the first, because when the private equity sells, people still have equity in the main, in that portfolio of companies. So it's very interesting, again, how he sees the journey of the agency life. That and many more on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution and production. Cash, we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background to make sure it makes it look easy for the host so they could just have the conversation and run their business. So, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. And I'm sure there's an episode that we've produced that is completely free that you can learn anything that you want. Cash, I'm excited to introduce Cash Miller. He's the founder and CEO of Titan Digital. And they made the Inc. 5000 list. He is an Army veteran with deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. He spent 20 years as an entrepreneur. And their company, I guess to sum it up, Cash, your company uses the internet to increase sales results for clients. That means building better websites. That means crafting SEO. That means PPC. That means social media campaigns. And they also, as I mentioned, have a franchise model, which is franchise.titandigital.com, which we'll talk more about. And Cash, thanks for joining me.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Just start off first. We'll get to the Army days and we'll get to what you did after the Army days and then back to the Army days and then to current. But talk about Titan Digital and what you do.
Well, we're full service. We build a lot of websites. We have like 600 or so clients, give or take a couple here and there. But, we're a digital marketing agency. So yes, we help people with SEO, pay-per-click. We do a lot of programmatic advertising now, for companies. We deal with a lot of different industries and such. I like to say we've kind of dealt with everything under the sun, because we've helped recruit truck drivers for companies, students for schools. We've done, things in the retail area. We have like a lot of Ace Hardware franchises as an example as clients. And we've dealt with a lot of insurance. So we've helped sell a lot of policies over the years. And so, our primary thing is lead generation for these different types of companies, but in some cases it's brand exposure. So it really depends on the goals of the company, but if it's digital related, we are doing it.
You have such an interesting timeline of, Army, then you had Miller Casino Services, which we'll talk about, then Army, then digital agency. So the second go around, you're a sergeant in the Army. What was the deciding factor? What were you thinking you were going to do next? Why digital agency?
Okay, so it goes kind of back to like my career before I went back in the military and such. And so it was about 2007. I was burned out from what I was doing. I built up a decent sized company in Las Vegas. We did a lot of contracting work for restaurants and casinos and stuff, doing restaurant remodels, seating and stuff. But I was very burned out. I'd been, it's not an easy business to be in. We'd become the largest company in the city for it, but I was done. I was toast. And so I decided, like, what am I going to do instead? And I said, I can't do this business thing anymore. Like I'd been doing about 8 years at that point, and I'd been in the military previously for 3 years in the 90s and stuff. And I had served in like Germany. I deployed to Bosnia and stuff when I was there. And I said, okay, well, I'm married. I've got my son. I've got to make sure I'm taking care of it, and I need something that's like a career. So let me go back to something I already know. I know what to expect. And it was 2007, and I knew what to, I knew if I joined, Iraq was in my future at the time, possibly Afghanistan, which both end up happening, but I'm like, okay, but I'm going to make a career. I've got 3 years done. I'll do another 17, 20 years. I'll retire and everything. It took about not even a year for me to start getting the entrepreneurial itch again and saying, okay, I need something, because I was getting ready to go to Iraq actually. And I was like, I need something to occupy my time a little bit when I'm not working, because you have some downtime and there's not a lot to do. So I'm like, okay, let me take everything that I'd learned in that 8 years. And I like to say, let me share all my mistakes and what not to do in business. And I'll put it online. Everybody's getting online. And now I knew nothing, besides surfing the internet like everybody else. I didn't have any specifics. And so I said, okay, I'll put content on. I see a bunch of, websites, people are putting, you think of magazines like Entrepreneur and Inc. and stuff. And I was like, well, there's other people starting brand new ones, right? So I decided I'll build one, I'll write a bunch of articles for it. And that's what I did, in my spare time. And then of course, you put something up.
Can you set the scene for me? You're in Afghanistan at this point. What is
Iraq at that point?
Iraq?
Yeah.
You're in Iraq. What does your environment look like when you're in Iraq?
So I was on a base in Baghdad. Actually, one of the worst areas. It's called Sadr City. And we're on a base that was known as Fob Rustamaya. And we're there. There's 4,000 or 5,000 of us living there, right? You've got walls all around you. It was an old Iraqi training base or something. And so we've got these really horrible barracks that we're living in. And the first 3 months I get there, every day you're scrambling for a bunker because mortars are, there was improvised mortars being fired over our walls. Every single day. And so you're at the chow hall, you're trying to eat lunch or whatever, and suddenly the alarm goes off and everybody's scrambling.
There's an explosion or something.
Yeah, you hear an explosion and stuff. And, so you have that kind of in the background. And of course, you're doing your day job and stuff, whatever it might be, and had various things. I was in a support unit, so we would go on the road. We would have to supply other bases and stuff. We would have to do, everything. We'd have MRAPs and stuff, and you'd, be a turret gunner or a driver or something. Everything was, every day would be a little different. And a lot of what my unit did would be missions in the middle of the night. We were known for putting out barriers. So, when you'd see images of Baghdad and stuff, and you see all these highway looking barriers, except that they're extremely tall. Yeah. Well, they were to stop IEDs, vehicle, what is known as a V-bed, so somebody, souping up a car or something with a bunch of explosives that would ram a convoy. So we would go out every night. We'd leave at 8:00 and we get back in the morning and stuff. And so you go out and we would take cranes and stuff, and we were laying those things everywhere. I heard something we put up 1 million tons or something,
Wow.
in the course of 12 months. It was constant. So
were people up in the night, when you were doing that? Were there people interacting with you, or was there a threat of your safety during that time?
Well, You mean like locals and stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we had people that I would interact with that were either on the bases that we've checked, checked out that had permission to enter the base, and also when you were on missions and stuff, you would have locals. Because what we would end up doing is, when we were running those particular missions, we would drive to the middle of a city wherever we had orders to go put these barriers up. So we would actually go to another base. We would load these, 2,000, 4,000 pound, like massive concrete barriers on the back of our trucks. And then we would take them out. And so we'd have to stop. And so the entire, you're there and it's like 10 o'clock at night or something. And you're either unloading your truck or you're scanning the whole area to see, for threats. Yeah. And you get people still out there, like,
because it's not like you can move that fast with like, you have tons of weight on your vehicle. It's not like you could just race off. So it seems pretty dangerous if someone wants to do something.
Yeah, we would, like I say, that was the thing, is we'd go in these like back alleyway areas or sometimes on main roads, but we'd be stopped, our entire, convoy of vehicles. And we would have, people, gun trucks and stuff to guard us against, threats and whatnot, but they never assigned us infantry, to go like clearing buildings or anything around us. It was watch, scan the area, keep an eye out for threats, report if you see something. Otherwise, get the stuff off your truck as fast as you can so we can get out of here.
I just want to set the scene, because like you weren't working like in a nice office building writing these articles, right? You're in this crazy environment while you're doing this.
Yeah. When I would come back, like if I had off time the next day and stuff, I shared a 3-man room, and that room was all of about 150 square feet or something like that. It was, like I say, they were old barracks. The buildings were probably 50 years old or more. And you were lucky to have an air conditioner because it was hot as could be. But you've got a bed and you got your stuff shoved on underneath. And when you have some downtime, I would be there and I would be working on the website. I would be writing content for it and stuff before content became what it became. Yeah, like I say, it was, early days of content marketing and everything. And I'm like, okay, here, let me write an accounting article or a marketing article or a management article. And that's what I ended up doing, during that period, while I was there, and I was able to build out that site. But of course, then eventually it's like, okay, now I have a site. What do I do to get people to actually look at it? And I started studying SEO. And this is, nowadays you've got courses and stuff. You've got tons of courses, on LinkedIn and other platforms, but you've also got universities teaching this stuff now. Back then, you've got basically whatever anybody else was sharing and putting up to, on how to rank art, content, websites, you name it. How do you optimize? It was still very early, and people, it wasn't what it became, and so it's exploded since in the last decade plus. But back then, you're trying everything to see what works and what doesn't. And there's nobody saying, hey, do this, this, this. Very rare. Some of those people became the true experts, that you end up following and learning from, but there was not that many of them.
So at that time, you're in the Army, you're talking about what you should not do, some of your experiences from the Miller Casino Services company that you built up. And by the way, you have big clients like MGM and other restaurants and hotels. So we'll talk about how you parlayed that into the digital agency, but just talk about what you should not do. What are the things you learned that you should not do from that company?
Well, one of the biggest lessons that you learn in business is, profit, yes, cash flow, more important. Like you can be profitable on paper and go broke. You can, so you always had to watch your bills, and what you were, timing things and whatnot, because we were heavy in having to buy materials for people, but you had people that had to pay. And when you're dealing with, especially like big clients and such, they're not necessarily on your schedule for paying their bills. So it was a huge lesson. Management, consider whenever you're getting into a business, who you're going to deal with. Like you've got a blue collar world, you've got a white collar world, you've got people that are, college educated, and people that might be, through trade schools or nothing. So who do you want to, deal with on a daily basis? Because it's like, and it's not an education thing, it's somewhat of a recruitment thing. Okay. So, when you have people that are trade laborers and stuff, some of the trades have problems of people showing up, and that's just what it is. Okay. And so, like I say, it's not an education thing, but the education kind of correlates with certain businesses, and those businesses present different challenges than you might have if you were dealing with college grads and stuff. Now, college grads will be a whole different, another challenge in their own. But what you're going to face is different, is the idea. So you have to consider when you're getting into business, what do you want to deal with and who? I say, large corporations. We deal with a lot of small businesses now, and one of the lessons I learned is get them paid by credit card. So you're paid up, because we're paid up front for our services, versus what we were doing, what I was doing previously. You could wait 60 days after you were done with a project or longer to get paid, and you've had to pay your suppliers. So that's where cash flow comes in. You're shelling out to keep your suppliers happy, but and when you deal with big companies and you're not a big company, that's another thing, is you're not the top of the priority list and you've got no leverage with them. You need them. They don't really need you. So you want to keep those kinds of things in mind. And how do you market a small business and such? How do you, what kind of approach are you going to have to take? Every business is like really can be very different. If, with large corporations versus small businesses, we had to, I got into different casinos and such and dealt with them because of who I developed relationships with. I found one of the best things is they would move. You'd have a chief engineer at a large casino go to another casino. Well, if you got a good relationship, they'll take you with them and you'll be able to build, but you build with a relationship with the person that's going to take their place too. So you keep the current business and you add something new. With restaurants, we actually developed a gimmick to get in the door. We convinced general managers. It was like, I've never seen any, like, they always need seating redone and stuff. They get tears and all that. And what we wanted to do was all the maintenance work. So the gimmick we developed was so like ridiculously simple, but nobody had ever thought of it. We would take and get asked we'd go to the GM. We'd say, hey, look, you've got these maintenance issues. We're willing to take care of it and stuff. And what we do is an inspection. And give us a floor plan. We put together a folder for you. And once a month, we'll come out and inspect. And when we do that, we'll mark off which ones are, kind of like stages, like this is really bad, do it now. This could wait another 30 days and stuff like that. Well, nobody was offering that kind of a service. We were offering it because it was guaranteed work. We just pick out a restaurant we hadn't been to in a little while, and we would know that something was going to be bad. And so when we didn't have major projects and stuff, we would just up the level of inspections so that we would get more of the maintenance work. And nobody was doing such a thing. So when we came around with something novel, it was like, hey, yeah, I'll listen to that. Sure. It was literally a floor plan, in a clear plastic so you could mark on the sheet in a little white folder. But but I had 100 restaurants because of that little book.
And people don't want to do it, right? I mean, they don't want to go around and check all that. They don't want to have their team go around and check all that every month. And
yeah, that's exactly it. So I was offering to do it, and we would just develop a route where we could do it quickly, and hit 5 restaurants, a rep or someone would go out, hit 10 restaurants in a day or something, do all the inspections before they open the doors and make sure they're all kind of clustered together so you can get to them quickly, and then come back and say, okay, we have thousands of dollars worth of work and I've got signed off on what to do already, and then we would just schedule it out over the next week. So having something, an angle in business is important.
I would love to hear the equivalent of these inspections to increase inspections. That was for the Miller Casino Services, to what is the equivalent in agency life? Like I could up these, and I just want to point out some of the stuff that you did. You worked with the Hard Rock, Las Vegas Hilton, MGM Grand, the Mandalay Bay, and you did reupholstery work for these companies. But I'd love to hear what's the equivalent of the inspection idea that gets you in the door in the agency world.
Probably I would equate it to traffic. So one of our standard practices is when we launch, we build a lot of websites. Okay. I'll build 150 to 200 every year, for companies, custom sites, insurance sites, and whatnot. But what we do on the back end is we'll install Google Analytics on every site, regardless of whether you're doing SEO or anything else. And the reason we do it is because if we track a history on that, then we can go use that data as a reference point to, they're already a client, in which case I can take the data and say, okay, you've got this great website and such, but you're not doing anything to drive traffic to it. And I have the proof. So if you want to be able to get more out of it, well, this is the service, that would work for you in your particular case. So do you want to, your website is a tool. Do you want to take that tool and make it more productive? If you do, then it might be a paid ad service, it might be SEO, whatnot. So that's one of the things by having the stats. So it's a standard practice for us. Every launch, we automatically, whether they ask for it or not, we're going to install the stats so that we have the record. And then we can go dig into those records and then approach those clients.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, even if you offered to someone, say, hey, do you have Google Analytics installed on your site? They're probably like, no. And we'll install it and we'll analyze it. There you go. But obviously you're going to have a prescription according to what you see. Similar to, do you want us to check your restaurant once a month and see what's broken?
Yeah, basically, like I say, we'll get one or two requests out of the entire year for people that, asking us to actually install it, because they've set up an account, they'll provide the code. The rest of them don't do it. I'm like, okay, we have a more advanced platform for people that are actively doing marketing and stuff. And then we're able to pull that data in through an API. But, if they're not set up that way we already have it. And also if they come to us and say, hey, do you have something on it? Because occasionally we'll get the request. Yes, we can pull the data. We have, we're going to have it no matter what. But yeah, it's one of those things to, there's also some other things too, like we use a website scanner for potential new clients so that it can basically give them an audit and we'll go through the audit. There's other companies do the same kind of thing, where it's, hey, we'll show you all the potential improvements you would be able to make on the site, which can improve your traffic, your SEO. And so, the different things that are going on, because depending on what you've got. So we'll do that on the front end, but the data and stuff is going to be on the back end for existing.
We'll talk about, so first of all, lesson is if you're feeling burnt out as an entrepreneur, you should join the army and get deployed to Iraq. No, I'm just kidding. As a solution to your burnout.
The Iraq part, but
no, a solution to your burnout. We'll talk about how you writing that information parlayed into the Titan Digital. But I just want to, for a second, if you're listening to the audio version, there's going to be a video version too. And I'm pulling up here titandigital.com so you can see their website. But it's funny because I was researching Cash before we did the interview. I already knew you did, without doing any research. I was like, this person did something in casinos. Okay. Your first name's Cash, first of all. Okay. But there's a book. I forgot what the book is called, but I was looking up the research. And there's research on why it's not weird that so many dentists are named Dennis. And there's actual research showing that people are likely to have names that are related to their occupations. And so there's actual scientific research on this. I forgot what book talks about this and popularized it a little bit more, but there's a higher percentage of, if you look at all the dentists and their names, there's a higher percentage named Dennis. So that popped in my head. I'm like, he had to do something with casinos because his name Cash. And that actually turned out to be true.
Yeah, actually, people ask, am I named after Johnny Cash and stuff? And I tell them, no, I'm not. I like him. I love his music and stuff, but I'm not named after Johnny Cash. I like to say that, like my dad, he was trying to predict the future when he named me. I'm named after a James Garner movie character where the movie was named Cash McCall. And it's from like 1965. I probably watched it like 20 times. But the character in the movie that James Garner plays, he is a business mogul that buys and sells companies. He takes them, he buys distressed businesses, he fixes them up, and then he sells them. Yeah, and it's James Garner in his prime. He was probably about 35 or something when he did the movie. Yeah, so yeah, and
You were
so it's
destined.
like,
You
so
were destined.
my father was trying to predict the future by naming me after a guy that would end up in business. And my family as a whole has an entrepreneurial bent anyway. Yeah, we don't really we
What did
don't
your
really
dad
look
do?
like. My father, and why I ended up in Vegas, he ran multiple companies over the years. I took over the business when I got out of the Army the first time because he had become a commodities trader, actually doing his own brokerage. But we moved to Vegas because of the sports books. Yeah, he was a handicapper and could figure out, who was winning and stuff, and he had done it since like 1980.
Wow.
Yeah, I never took to it. My uncle though did, and I have a cousin that did. Yeah,
I
but he
never,
was.
it's amazing how spot on those are and how they know that stuff. I have zero idea.
Well, what it was reams of, remember the old like columnar pads and stuff? The gray and with all the lines on them and everything, books and books and books. But he was really good at predicting. And in sports, if you can win, it's like 52.7% of the time, as long as you don't change your bet, you will make money. So yeah, he was really good at
Interesting.
that. And that's why I ended up in Vegas to begin with as a kid.
So how did Titan Digital start?
Titan Digital came along as my exit plan from the Army the second time. So because I was learning SEO, one of the things I learned early in building out this website was that I didn't want to write all the content. That's a lot of work, right? So I started looking at places where I was publishing to get the backlinks and such, back in the days of like e-zines and stuff, which still exist, but they're not, very, very effective anymore. But I was, publishing content there. So I started looking around and I said, okay, who else would be an expert in this particular, subject of management and accounting? I started contacting business coaches. I'm like, well, they're going to know. And they were writing content. So I started reaching out to them, and I had about 25 or so that were allowing me to publish their stuff. And I would give them the backlink. So I wasn't having to pay for it, but some of the pieces would be, become popular and everything. And it was before the days of duplicate content and stuff. So I developed a few relationships with those people. And in a few instances, the coaches asked me if, because eventually my traffic numbers were getting pretty good. And they were asking me what I was doing for it. And I would explain to them, and they would be like, can you do it for us? And I'm like, well, sure. You pay me some money. It's, it was a little bit of side freelance stuff, but it kept allowing me to practice and test more things. Towards the end of my Army enlistment, I was in Afghanistan, and one of my
charging people, you're in the Army at this point, and you have a side gig, basically charging people for SEO services.
Yep. I've got my own side hustle going on and stuff before, everything was a side hustle. So I'm in Afghanistan, and I had actually, right before we deployed, I managed to land a client that was an M&A company, a mergers and acquisitions company, and they wanted me to run pay-per-click ads. And I'm like, sure, I can do that. It was like a referral from somebody else. And I'm like, yeah, I can run, pay-per-click ads, no problem. And, but they didn't know I was in the Army. I wasn't telling anybody. I say I was just,
you didn't take a picture and here's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So
here's me in the middle of the night.
Right. And now internet was spotty out there, of course, but we did have access and stuff. And we'd have the, like the MWR, we'd have places where, computer banks and stuff, you go get a terminal, work for a little bit, do whatever you're doing. So what I would do is in the evenings, I was running, Google pay-per-click ads, on Google AdWords, as it was known back then. And so I would go in the evenings and I would work on their account. I would get on one of those computers. I would access it from our base in Kandahar, and I would work on that account. And I remember it was hilarious because the client wanted me to get on a call. And we didn't have like we have now with Zoom and things like that. So that stuff didn't exist. And I didn't have a phone, out there, but some other people had brought ones, and they were like super expensive, to have the minutes and everything. Because I said, it's Afghanistan, right? So I said, okay, I will. And a buddy said, I'll loan you my phone. You can call them up. So I'm here on this base in the middle of Kandahar, 11 o'clock at night, using a satellite phone so I could call back. They had no clue. And I'm discussing their account. And I'm actually not even in a building. I'm like under the stars and stuff, because it was the quietest place I could find was actually to be outside because it was late. And I got nothing around me except for, a bunch of rock and stuff and walls. So I'm like discussing their account and everything. And they'd never had one, no idea at all that I'm in the middle of this, in Afghanistan, and I've been managing the account the entire time. I'm like, well, if I can make it work here, I could probably, because as I get close, I'm like, maybe I can make a living at this.
Let me put all the barriers possible: lack of internet, no phone, living in a barracks, bombs around me. I could probably do it in the US then, right?
Yeah. If you can get it done that way, you can definitely make it work in the US.
So, because you could have stayed in the Army. So you left. At what point do you decide, okay, I need to do this?
I ended up in Afghanistan for like 6 months, and I kind of decided at the time, the Army comes to me and says, look, for an extra $500 a month, because our deployment was 12 months. The Army, when I was in Iraq, had something known as stop loss, which kept people from leaving until the deployment was over. But the Army had ended the practice. And I had seen, I had met a lot of guys, I knew a lot of people that hated they were being forced to stay longer than necessary. And I'm like, and there was a number of us that over the period, what they were going to have to do is release us from the military. They would send us back home so we could out process like normal and everything. And there was about 20 of us in my company or something that ended up doing that. $500 a month. My job is literally to go on the road every other day on average, to go to like a dozen different bases to take supplies and stuff. And we have to go through the middle of Kandahar. And you're going to pay me an extra $500 to continue to do that for another 6 months, like an extra $500 a month for 6 more months. So you want to give me $3,000 to keep doing that? Where, it's IEDs and stuff and people want to know. And I can go home and I can get out, or I can make a few extra dollars and risk my life. Nah, I'm good. I've done enough risking. There's a point where you feel like, you've gotten lucky. You've known, because I knew people that weren't so lucky, friends and stuff that, that were, killed while we were over there. And I was like, I have a family. And by then I had a daughter too. And I'm like, I can't risk it. There's no way. And also the constant deployments. I would, out of the 4.5 years I was in the second time, I was literally gone from home over 2 of it. Between training, deployments and stuff. So I'm like, I can't keep doing this. And by then I was really starting to understand what I was, looking at from, I got into this SEO thing, and I'm starting a business from scratch. That's a different challenge. So it was like, yes. So I knew before we had even deployed that I was going to come back early, before the rest of the unit, because I was not going to extend. There's no way. I say it was too much of a risk. So, I came.
It's just tough, Cash. That's another big motivator, I bet, which is just being away from family.
Yeah. No, with the military, it's huge. There's only so much. The people that go full careers, it's a real strain on family life. And there's a lot of people end up divorced and stuff because of it. It's just a lot to deal with, so anybody that makes it a career, I applaud them for being able to stick it out. I do wonder how much, that they've kind of paid the price for that. I say, because I always love when I hook up with veterans and stuff and we kind of talk, our own experiences and everything. And I've run into people that I've crossed, I have a client that just signed today, and he served in Germany and left 2 years before I was there. And so we knew some of the same places and stuff. It's always an experience, talking with them.
I want to talk, Cash, the evolution of the services, also the evolution of the pricing, right? So in the beginning, it's SEO. Then someone's like, hey, can you do this PPC thing? And you're like, sure. And then in the beginning, how do you decide how to charge versus now?
It's really, it's a lot different. And I see this with a lot of, I've talked to other agency owners that are just getting their start, and pricing is an issue because, they're trying to get whatever they can. I literally just a couple of weeks ago, I talked with a guy that's, starting his own deal up, and he's actually a 20-year Army retiree that he got out like a year or so ago, and he's trying to make a go of it. And we were talking pricing, because it's a struggle. When I first got out, I would take any project that I could, and I started with just SEO because that's what I knew. What I did not know was how many people I would run into at the time. This is 2011. How many people I would run into that didn't even have a website. So I'm like, well, I can't SEO something that doesn't exist. So that is, you talk evolution of services. I started offering websites, because we build everything on WordPress and stuff. And at the time you could get templates and you still can, of course, but you learn the back end. With most businesses, the best managers are the ones that they don't have to be an expert at any particular thing, but at some point it helps if they've dabbled in it, and understand the inner workings. Like to this day, I still do a bunch of the SEO on our site, because I know it really well, and so you take it as an evolution, and then eventually you have clients that start asking you, can you do this? And most full service agencies, so at some point they just had to say yes. When social media, started becoming big, hey, can you do our Facebook posts and can you run our ads? Well, I'm doing this other stuff, so it's natural. I'm going to say yes to that, and then I'll figure it out. And then eventually you get good at it, and we start taking on employees that over time they're experts in particular areas. But services, you have to be careful with that. Nobody starts out charging what they really should, because they're trying to land business. Over time, you have to evolve. So the tricky thing is like, okay, you start to realize, I look at services from the standpoint of hourly. We charge set fees, okay? But when I'm judging how long, like what that fee should be, I have to look at it from an hourly standpoint of how much time we're going to have to put into it to make it successful. So I have to keep that in the back of my mind. So if we're predetermining fees on the front end, I'm calculating, I'm doing the math on the back end. And then you think about it with any service, I don't care what business you're in, the more you learn about it, the better informed you are going to be when you start to determine it, what that ultimate price point should be. And I mean, we charge 5 times, 6 times, what we did when I first started out. And, you talk about like salaries and stuff too have gone up, there's a trade-off there. So you have to consider, I can be on the more experienced end, but it's going to cost me more with people, which means I got to charge more. Or I can be on the less experienced, so I can keep my costs down. So pricing is a mind game that you actually have to play, not necessarily with the client, you're playing it within to see what you're worth.
You mentioned, Cash, about, I want to highlight a little bit about what you do, and I want to talk about the franchise piece too. You mentioned, obviously, you have a wide variety of type of companies that you help. I was reading like from Harley Davidson to women's health to insurance to attorneys to, you mentioned the truck driving schools. I want to talk about, I know you help a lot of independent insurance agencies. I want to talk about Ace Hardware because that's helping also kind of franchisees and what you did there. And then I'd love to talk about Titan Digital and what you're doing with the franchise space. But start with just Ace Hardware. What'd you do with them?
Well, in the case of Ace, a few years ago, I actually bought an agency. We've got multiple locations, one of which is in Colorado. I'm in Tennessee, and we've got another office in Missouri. And we've also got staff in Costa Rica. We're spread out, quite a bit. So in the case of Ace Hardware, that actually came along because I bought the other agency, and it had a couple of hundred accounts. And the owner of that one had managed to figure out a way to get an Ace Hardware. He had a lot of contacts. And so when we took over those accounts, what we found was it really goes down to, what are their goals? Ace Hardware itself has their own programs, and they want their franchisees using those programs. But a lot of the franchisees have really built up their own like mini empires, and they want to have more control over that. And Ace allows them to have that control. So with franchisees, of any, whichever chain it is, right? you have to kind of see what structure that they have, what they allow and don't allow. In the case of who we deal with, email marketing is heavy, because they have a lot of rewards programs. So you have to see what kind of assets that you have. Well, getting those, emails, people signing up for rewards was an asset. And then, they are big on branding because, ACE, we, hear the commercials all over the place and stuff and have forever. Well, they aren't really pushing specific products. What we've actually done, because we've got some clients where we're rebuilding sites and stuff and replacing them, we're putting focus on the brands they deal with, rather than, because they don't run e-commerce stores. ACE has their own e-commerce ecosystem, so they prefer to just push them over there, and then they'll get the credit through ACE through referral codes and stuff, that come through the URLs. So what they're looking at is, you want to be able to push the walk-in traffic. Programmatic advertising is huge in that, to really own your market. I'm real big about, small businesses. If you're an ACE Hardware, yes, you're part of a larger ecosystem, but you, in many towns of 20, 30, 40,000 people and stuff, they are the primary hardware store, and there might be some other ones. You want to let everybody know. You want to own that market. And like I say, regardless of what type of business, it's very possible to do that. It's harder to do it in like a Nashville or something, right? But a smaller town, like I know I'm in a town of 170,000 people just south of Nashville. We've got one ACE Hardware, but that ACE has to compete with a Lowe's and a Home Depot. So for them to really put their brand out locally is very important. In which case, we combine the email with the programmatic, and then we're highlighting these big brands that they carry rather than, individual products or departments. Like I say, because they've got high margin stuff, lawnmowers and things like that. So it's like, okay, what's really going to be the driver that's differentiating you from, like I say, because we know how brand loyalty can work, including to individual products. So if you say, hey, we're carrying, like they carry steel, which like the STIHL. So they carry that brand, and they have all sorts of, outdoor lawn care stuff, blowers and trimmers. So it's like, hey.
Yeah, you get them in for like fertilizer, and then they may want the high margin, high profit lawnmowers or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. In which case, like I say, you show that brand loyalty. I want that brand. I don't want the generic one. I don't want the, it's the Great Value Walmart. I don't care about that. Why do people still buy, I say something that's going to be, a lot more expensive? Because they build brand loyalty. That's why brands build up their stuff. So we're trying to leverage that loyalty to those individual brands that ACE Hardware actually sells.
Let's talk about, then you decide, okay, I'm getting good at this stuff. We have a lot of clients, and you have a franchising model. So talk about the decision to do that and how that works.
The franchising is, I like to say, so in this particular, in the digital marketing field, all right, in the digital marketing field, what you have is a very low barrier to entry. What we find is everybody's an expert, right? At one time I was an expert and I knew SEO and stuff. And so I started up an agency, it was just me. And, now I've got, 30 plus people, but it is an evolution to become actually the expert. So the barrier to entry into this field is not very high. Everybody, watch some course on YouTube or something, and suddenly you're an SEO expert, or, I don't know how many times I've run into somebody that says, well, my brother or my brother-in-law or something is,
it's
so
like my niece uses Facebook. I think she could run my ads.
Exactly. So that's still this like very common occurrence. I'm like, okay, sure. But while the barrier to entry is really low, the barrier to success is extremely high. We managed to make the Inc. 5000 list for this most recent year and stuff. And it took a while to get there. Everybody, I was on a podcast, or not on one, but listening to one yesterday. And they mentioned that in this particular field, they see the hump as being about $30,000 in monthly recurring revenue, as being the point that people can't get beyond. And they're right. That's like one of them. You will hit multiple if you try to build a business in this field, because as soon as you get beyond yourself, the money you're making on the accounts is just going to go to pay employees. So what we've done, because in the digital marketing space, franchising has not really happened. Like I say, we're a very fragmented industry, and you have some really big companies and such, and you have some companies that were like former Yellow Page companies that got into the space and stuff. So there are a few big corporations, and there's tons of small, agencies, 1, 2, 3, person shops and stuff. But there's not really much in the way of franchising. And the idea with the franchising is that we will act, because the barrier usually is fulfillment of the services. If you're a single person, right? Like when I first started, okay, I had to go out and I had to sell. Yeah. And then once I did the selling, okay, now I got to go back and I got to do the work. And if I'm doing the work, I can't sell more. But if I'm working, if I'm selling, I can't do the work, so I'm stuck in between. So a lot of freelancers end up taking on a project and they do the project and they got to go find the next project. So with us, the concept is we'll act as the fulfillment. Okay. You can focus on the selling. I like to equate it to like State Farm, farmers, things like that, right? State Farm is writing the actual policy. Okay. They're providing it, but it's the agent that builds the relationship, with the clients, make sure that they want to stay on board. What more can they do? Expand the relationship and build as many of those relationships as you can. And then they've still got to act, they still have to deal with the State Farm. They still have to make sure that the policy is going to be correct and stuff. So we act kind of like that. We're the fulfillment. So if you end up getting a service, if you're doing paid ads, you need a website, whatever, our staff is going to take care of putting that together. And under the franchise model, we can deal directly with the client. In our field, there's a lot of like white label services and stuff. It's somebody selling it, but somebody else is actually doing the work anyway. But the problem is those people can't communicate. Whoever's actually doing it. So you've got, you're running paid ads. Well, they got to go contact the owner, who then has to contact the client and such. Versus
there's a lot of middle people and middle communication that could be cut out.
Exactly. You've got those middle people. So the idea is I will give you a permanent project manager that works with your projects, the clients you bring in, so that you can build a relationship with the project manager, but they can deal directly with the client. Same thing with account managers and stuff. If you need a paid ad strategist, you need somebody to help close a deal, well, we can provide that extra expertise, that support that you need when you ask for it. Because it's all under one individual brand still. But you're also going to be able to build, your agency up at a quicker pace. You're going to be able to scale it easier, and you're going to build equity and value in that. The beauty of, if you build up a State Farm, or something along those lines, is you're building up something with equity. If you're working for one of these big corporations and you're selling and stuff, you're the rep. You're not building any equity for yourself, though. There's no payout. The economy, we all know it's like been kind of weird. Nobody can quite figure out what it wants to do. Well, if those companies change course and they decide to lay people off, you've got nothing. Versus if you are building up, an agency of your own, then you're going to be able to build equity in that. And that's the problem is the guys that are doing it 1, 2 person and stuff, they can't get over the hump. Like I say, the guy I talked to was a 20-year vet, got retirement luckily, because he made it to the end. He's trying to start something up, but he's got a freelance graphic designer and somebody else helping with SEO that's still in the Army. So he doesn't really have a staff, and that's the problem. And he's trying to sell to the next person, and he's got to do a bunch of the work himself.
I'd love to hear, gosh, who is an ideal franchisee? But I mean, it's almost like you're picturing yourself in the barracks and you just wish, okay, I'm going to get the client and just hand it to a company to take care of the rest almost. So who's an ideal franchisee for Titan Digital franchising?
Well, I picture myself like about a year in of actually doing this. Because when I first started, literally, they talk about putting a shingle out and stuff. I rented an office. I said, I got to make this, I have to do this. So the ideal person that comes in 2 forms actually with us. Like I say, I mentioned that there are large corporations that do digital marketing, but so people that are doing sales in those large corporations, what they're learning is not just that product, they're learning to understand what digital marketing is, because we do something that people don't often appreciate how complicated it can be to get the right strategies and make them work. And there's a lot that goes into it, whether you're running an ad, like say, if you're doing ads for programmatic or pay-per-click, people think, oh, add some keywords into a paid ad, and then you're going to write some descriptions. You're doing ad copy. Okay. That's what you're doing. You're doing what's the teaser to get someone to click the link. It is a little more complicated than just, hey, yeah, because they say anybody can write a Google, paid ad. Okay. Yeah, anybody can. And I'll show you how much money they're going to lose, so, for a number of reasons. But what you do, like I say, if you're working for one of these large companies that have gone into digital marketing, that might have been a phone book company at one time and stuff, you're learning that ecosystem. You're learning what things, the ins and outs of websites, paid ads, SEO and stuff, and you understand how to talk about it because you understand what goes on. So your education is there. And that makes a really good candidate, because what you don't want is you're tired of probably the corporate life, right? You're tired of answering to somebody that you've never even met in person. So you're tired of that. You want the independence to make your own schedule. They have an entrepreneurial bent, but they want to have the support system. They work for a large corporation because of the support structure. But they're tired of all of there's a lot of headaches that come with working for large corporations too. There's a lot of drama and stuff and things that go on. So that's one. And then the other one would be, agency owners that are running into those humps. They're small, they're 1, 2, 3 people and stuff, and they're running into the hump of, how do I take this to another level? They can't figure it out. It can be hard. You try to get to, you get to one, you think you're over it, and then you go backwards. Like say you take on, you land an account, you dream account, and then you're trying to figure out how to get it done. And you're spending so much time on those accounts, that you can't sell more, so you can't grow. Like say you're stuck. One of the things that helped us years ago is, for about 5 years, I actually had a partner in this. I didn't take the partner on until I was about 1.5 years in, but I was hitting the hump. So I brought on somebody that knew sales. I was good at sales, but I also needed to get the production done. So I partnered up. We're not partners anymore. We since parted ways and we're friends. But you have to have something, right? You had to change the dynamic to be able to grow. And that's who makes the ideal franchise owner. That they understand that they've hit the hump.
How does it work? I know the franchise model, typically there's usually an upfront fee and then a percentage. How does that part work for someone interested?
So we charge, there's an upfront fee. Yes, we do in-house financing on those fees and stuff to make it a little easier, especially we understand coming from a corporate job. We're looking at that you have that knowledge. So you do want to be prepared as a franchise owner, that knowing that you're going to have to build your book and that can take a little while. And it really depends on how aggressive. That's why we like people that already have experience. If you have someone that's starting from scratch and they don't know the industry, they're going to really struggle. And we're not going to want to, we'll try to help you, but you're not really the ideal candidate, because we know what it's going to, the struggle that you're going to go through, and I don't want to set people up for failure. So you've got that to consider. The royalty fee is really low. It's like 3% is all we're doing, because what we're looking at is the fulfillment end. Is that we're partnering with you to make sure that those services are taken care of. We're allowing that they can price whatever they want. We have suggested prices. We have set fulfillment fees, for doing them, for handling those services and stuff. So we give them plenty of margin room, to be able to work with clients and different situations, which is really important for them. Because like I said, they're going to be building their own book of business, and they'll find what services, are a best fit. I was talking to somebody earlier today and they were like, we can only sell this package and this package, it's these packages. They have no way of doing any kind of a la carte, that to situate. So they're literally forcing clients to buy, products and services that client doesn't actually need, because it's part of the package and there's no flexibility there.
In the end, like you mentioned, white label versus franchise, you take a bunch of risk also, because is your reputation, right? They're representing Titan Digital at this point.
Yes.
So how do you vet? How are you going to vet people? You know,
We're
because
gonna
someone
look
may have the money, but they're also representing your brand at this point, right?
Right. So we want to look at how long that they've been doing this. Um, in the case of coming from like a large corporation, we'll end up talking to some of the people they deal with, references and stuff, because what we need to see is temperament and ability to, stick it out, because it's any business. I don't care if you're a franchise. I say it has a ramping up period. So what we're looking for is that you'll have the perseverance. Usually the people we're kind of looking at, if they're working with a large corporation, have they been there 2, 3, 4 years? They've had the perseverance. They've been able to build the book once, so they're going to have confidence in themselves to be able to do it again. And this time they'll be more motivated because they're doing it for themselves. Versus turning those accounts over. The corporation takes care of it, and it says, hey, go find the next one. So because we want you working with these owners and stuff, building them up, but you don't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. So we're looking at that. We're looking at, in the case of existing owners, that are running small agencies, that's a conversation of what you've been doing with them. You might want to talk to a couple of their clients and stuff just to see, what, are they good to work with? Again, we want references and such, but if you've been doing it for a while, then it's a matter of like, what have you been offering? How has it worked and stuff? So it's kind of a review of the agency to a small degree, to see exactly what they've been able to accomplish since they've started.
Cash, first of all, thank you. I have one last question. Before I ask it, I want to just point people to check out more. If you want to learn more, you can go for the franchising piece. It's franchise.titandigital.com. If you just want to check out their website, it's titandigital.com. Last question, Cash, is favorite tools and software. This is a great topic. Agency owners love this topic. I know you mentioned a couple, the ones like Google Analytics, Website Scanner. What are some other of your favorite tools and software for agency owners?
When it comes to running an agency, so one that we've taken to, I'll mention a couple. Agency Analytics is one that's become a pretty good one, pretty big for reporting tools. I've used probably half a dozen over the years and stuff, and Agency Analytics is the one. It's a little pricier, from that, it's about $5 per account you put on, something like that. But it's got a real big advantage for what it's able to display data-wise, because they've got API feeds for most everything. So we're able to show you what you're doing with your programmatic, and your Facebook ads and your, SEO. It can pull keyword data and stuff as far as rankings, things like that. So it's very all-encompassing. And what it does, two things I like is, you can automate the reporting to send out, to everybody on a set schedule, right? And it'll always have that, the latest data and whatnot. But they do have a dashboard function that you can you can set up the dashboard and then share the link with the client, and they can see everything real time whenever they choose. So that's a really important piece. And so it's got other things. The other thing I really have taken to is, for years, Pipedrive is, I like to think of it as like Salesforce Lite. Salesforce can be very complicated, and Pipedrive has become an all-encompassing tool, where it used to be from a sales standpoint. It is still that, but it's got a very good CRM in there. And on top of it, they've added project management software. So everything is pretty seamless. You start with the deal, which helps create the organization, and it's very customizable. We got all sorts of fields to track different things. And then you can have the project in there, and they use the, where you can slide everything, from stages and such, one stage to the next, and you can just move them over the different projects you're working on, and you can template a lot of stuff. So, if you've got a certain way of doing your projects, you create the template and then automatically load that for the different types of projects. So we've got projects for SEO versus websites versus, paid ad, campaigns and stuff to get them up and running. So it's extremely versatile. They're still moving along with the project side, but we've been happy with it. And one of the things that we've liked is, because we're an early adopter for the project stuff, we've used it for years for the deals, but they were willing to listen to us as we kept making suggestions. It's like, hey, we needed to do this and this and this. And they were like, okay, give us a little time. And they've got a pretty good community of people that are also providing more info, and they're giving out updates and stuff as they get things, situated and say, hey, now we've got this. And, so Pipedrive has been really good. Again, a little pricier depending on where you're at in your own stage and stuff.
They're really robust. I mean, you could use 5% of it and be good, or you could use, I've found is you could drag people different columns and send automated email. I mean, they do a lot of functionality. I actually had one of the founders on my podcast. They were 10,000 customers. Now they're over 100,000 customers. Yes. But yeah, they know what they're doing over there.
Yeah, they really do. And we were from a CRM / I hate to knock a company, but we were using Zoho, which I know is very popular. That thing is a night and day difference for us because the different functions are way more seamless. That's the big thing is, your project's working much better because everything on the other platform was more of, operating individually, and I needed them all to talk to each other. So you can set up a project and it will pull deal data as a reminder to my project managers, hey, somebody's got some money due when we get to this next stage. Things like that are in there. So that's become one of our real big things. And it was a bear to move over to this thing because we had to get the entire company to, reorient on their training and stuff on what they were doing. And we spent months getting it together. So no, if you're making a switch from a different software, like I say, you have to be prepared for it, that it's going to take a minute. But if you're patient and you're willing to learn it, it becomes very intuitive. That's the big thing that was really surprised me is how intuitive it was actually.
Yep. Any others are your favorites?
Those two, and honestly, we use Office 365. I'm not going to say that I'm a huge fan of Microsoft and whatnot, but I do like the Teams function. And one of the things I like is the fact that because it's larger, and yes, Google, I know there's a difference between the two that I've always found is because of SharePoint. I don't know if Google has changed their structure, but we had a problem on that end. Somebody creates a file, and if they were to leave the company or something, they're the owner of the file, and it was extremely hard. In SharePoint, you can keep everything, there's no owner to it, so the document can keep living regardless of who's using it and stuff. So that was one of the things that we preferred. But one of the things I like about is actually Teams itself. Things like Pipedrive, they have integrations, and of course Zapier is a great thing, for integrating. They integrate into pretty much everything you can think of now. But we've been able to set up Pipedrive notifications that tell me on Teams. So I'm able to have Pipedrive notify me through a Teams channel that says it's from Pipedrive, and Teams has other integrations like that, for other software, but it's able to tell me when a deal closes, a project stage changes, whatever I wanted to. Basically, I've been able to set up automations to notify me so I can keep track of stuff without having to dig into everything. So I like that. I can just check the channel that's sending me the notifications, and I can look through the last day's worth of stuff, and I can see, if we signed a new client, we lost a client, a project moved along the stage, project got finished, all of it I'm getting updated, and I don't have to go digging, and I don't have to go ask.
Cash, what about project management? Because I know you have a lot of clients, you have a lot of moving pieces. What do you like for the project management standpoint?
Well, we're actually using Pipedrive.
Oh, you use Pipedrive for the project management?
I say Pipedrive only came out with the project management about, I want to say 2 years ago. Something like that. So it's still got some work to do, but what I like about it is it is seamless with the sales and the CRM. Okay, that's the thing, because I go into an organization, I can find all the deals that were ever created, but I can also find all the projects we ever worked on, for that. And that was the problem. That's the issue of multiple pieces of software. Like I say, we were using Pipedrive from a sales standpoint, but we were using Zoho from a CRM standpoint, which didn't talk to our project side, not very well anyway. And these things are, seamless. They all talk to each other, and they can pull data from different areas. And that's the thing. I can create a project in Pipedrive, and I can pull specific data from the deal side and pull it into the project so that the project manager knows certain pieces of information. For example, if there are benchmark payments and stuff due, I'm able to pull that data. But they can also pull in who the original deal creator was, who sold it and stuff. There's a lot of other things you're able to do.
Cash, first of all, thank you. This was fantastic. Thanks for sharing your journey. Everyone check out, like I said, Titan Digital, everything they're doing, and more episodes of the podcast. And thanks, Cash. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like $100 grand.